After 10 properties, I found, the first couple after that, it's like, who should I work with? And I worked with some random banks and different brokers and things like that. And then I realized credit unions are really the way to go after this.
Mhm.
So I started working with credit unions, and a lot of them are pretty good with not having a cap as to number of doors. They're going to look at debt service ratios, and they're going to start using they're going to want like a DCR of 1.2 or higher. So
Right.
people can kind of Google that. But sometimes some banks will go as low as 1.1 or even 1.0 if they use something called a step up covenant.
Mhm.
Um, but it allowed me to continue acquiring buildings myself with my own money, and without bringing on partners. And the qualifying ability was huge for that. I mean, a lot of people stop acquiring because they can't continue qualifying. So
Okay.
the challenges with investing solo are learn how the things you have to learn are how to work with different lenders and get yeses, and how to do deals that are good enough that you can get your money back out.
Right.
So if you can do those two things, then you can continue scaling.
Yeah, yeah. And so was it the credit unions that you used in 2021, I think it was, right? When you started going to bigger multis?
Yes, exactly. And to this day, that's what I'm doing. I'm not doing any of the CMHC or MLI Select stuff. I just like the flexibility of working with credit unions. I also like that, if the deals you're doing are good enough, then it works with that type of lending.
Mhm.
Things like MLI Select and stuff like that, or like some of the CMHC stuff, if you can get these massive loan to values, of course the deal works. It works with almost anything.
Right.
But we want to make sure the deals are good enough to actually make sense with more standard financing.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reality of it is, some of those programs aren't always as good as they seem. They can be good options for some people in certain situations, but it really works mostly when you have a building that's fully stabilized,
Mhm.
which is a difficult place to get things at. And the reality is, then you lock in for something like 5 years. Well, what if 2, 3 years down the line you're like, I really like to access some of this equity now
Right.
that's built up. Well, you
Yeah.
can't really, and most lenders aren't going to allow seconds. First National does, even with CMHC. So that's a tip for some people if they are going that route. But um, yeah, I like the flexibility of credit unions. For example, my 24 unit building, luckily I had mostly fixed mortgages, but I had three variable, and one of them was my 24 unit building, and
Right.
that went from like a 2.7 to 6 point something, and the mortgage payment went up $8,000 a month
Oof.
during that time.
Right.
So that was what I was like, oh man, like luckily I had turned eight of the 24 units over. So we'd gotten a lot of the rents significantly up and
Right.
decreased a lot of the expenses, but it lost money at that point. Like, when the mortgage goes up that much. So, the rest of my portfolio was doing decently, it was still positive. So I was able to help float some of it, but
Yeah.
overall, not happy with how that was looking. So I talked to my credit union and said, can we convert this to an interest only loan for a year?
Mhm.
Because I've done everything a competent investor could do with this building, and it still isn't working because of the
Right.
rates. So they said, yeah, that makes sense. So they converted it to a 1 year to a 1 year interest only. And I
Right.
mean, most lenders aren't going to do that stuff, but credit unions, they can tend to be a little more like, okay, look at your situation. I put a multi-page PDF together, business case for the reasons why I think this makes sense, and it got approved. So yeah, I like the flexibility of working with credit unions, and not just one. Like, you can talk to all the local credit unions that work either in like your market or your specific municipality. Sometimes these
Mhm.
these hyper local credit unions can be a great option.